So kicking off, quick agenda. We'll be looking first off at the overall concept of road mapping, certainly the definition that we have, different tools and methods that we might be able to use to do road mapping. We'll then take a look at what we call the traditional roadmaps, and you may have seen these in previous Avolution webinars. We have had these around for some time, and of course they might align with ones that you've seen out there from other sources as well. And then we'll take a look at the more analytical roadmaps, which are more advanced and a bit more detailed and focus more on the data side. But hopefully that will give you a good grounding in road mapping for your enterprise architecture practice. A quick introduction from myself. My name is Liam Ryan. I am the Southeast Asia Region Manager, and I'll be the host for today. And I'm, of course, joined by my co-host and technical software consultant, Ryan Zhu. So Ryan will be showcasing a bit of road mapping in ABACUS today, and also taking us through some of the finer points of road mapping. So a quick background first on Avolution and ABACUS. We have been in the architecture space now for 22 years. We only just celebrated our 22nd birthday, in fact, in October. And also at the same time, I should mention the release of ABACUS 11. So it's a very exciting time for us. So we're having a great time over here. We are, of course, a global company. We have offices worldwide. Our headquarters is in Sydney, Australia, and we do have offices in Singapore, London, the USA, Canada, South America, and the Middle East as well. We are, of course, a leader in the Gartner MQ and Forrester Wave and a number of other independent tool reviews. If you would like more information on that, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to share details on that. And we do have thousands of ABACUS users around the world, some in fact, which I think are joining us today, which is great to see. Of course, if you're new to ABACUS and Avolution, welcome. Great to see you here as well. And we do have users in over 100 countries around the world. That's enough on the side of Avolution and our background. Let's jump into what we're looking at today, which is road mapping. And to kick us off, we'll first take a quick look at what road mapping is at a high level. So there are many different road mapping definitions out there, and of course, many different perspectives. But today we will, of course, be looking at road mapping in the context of enterprise architecture. On screen at the moment, you can see our basic breakdown of the core components of what we think a roadmap needs to have. But Ryan, can you take us through this and maybe explain a little bit more about it?
Yeah, sure. So really, I think roadmap is simply about the strategic planning for changes. So as you can see from the illustration, so first, we do need to decide what is the need for the change. And that comes from your strategic requirement. So once the need is identified, we like to plan for what changes we make to satisfy the needs, and when the change should happen, and how to implement those changes. So that's a generic definition of roadmap in action. Roadmap and roadmap in action will generally be domain focused.
Okay, so it's domain focused, and of course, I guess that the high level sort of definition there is really important to start with. But what sort of roadmaps specifically would EAs generally be expected to create then?
Yep, good question. So there can be business capability and process roadmap, application roadmap, technology roadmap, etc. And almost always the roadmap for each domain will be dependent on each other. So that's why it's important to utilize EA frameworks and tooling for holistic planning and implementation.
Okay, great. No, that certainly makes sense. Well, let's take a look at the different road mapping methodologies now to explain a little bit more detail about these different types that we have and how you can start to produce roadmaps. So we're going to break this into two key areas, as I mentioned earlier. We have the traditional road mapping approach, which tends to be quite structural and will help you set a good baseline for your EA practice or for whatever type of roadmap you're looking to create, any type of analysis you're looking to produce. And then we have the analytical road mapping, which is a lot more advanced and builds on top of these traditional concepts with more data and metrics to further serve the wider organization. So we'll cover both in today's session, but for now, more of a focus on traditional road mapping. So for the analytical road mapping later, we'll have a quick glance. And if you find those concepts useful, please let us know, and we'll certainly try and arrange a follow-up session, or we can send you more information directly as well. So to start with these traditional roadmaps, we have 4 distinct types. These 4 types can be implemented in isolation, of course, but there's also a natural logical progression from type 1 to type 4, as you'll see. So kicking off, let's look at type 1 with tagging, with suggestions, recommendations, and of course, heat mapping. So Ryan, why would we make this our type 1? Or why does the type 1 with tagging and heat mapping come first?
So the reason we've always put this one first is because we find that this method benefits almost all the organizations as a quick and clear direction. So this tab really helps answer the questions of what we want to take forward and what to leave behind, and also where do we need to focus on.
Okay, so can I just color in any of the boxes we've got here on screen, or any areas that I think are important?
Yep, of course, you can do it manually, but usually we do the road mapping related properties for tagging. So the ones you see in the screenshot is actually from the lifecycle property. So other properties can be used for tagging, will be like strategic importance, financial returns, and as mentioned, the lifecycle recommendation, such as the 4Rs, return, retain, refresh, redesign, return. But no matter which properties you use for tagging, the idea is really just to provide high level of overview of the change we want. Yep, and that's enough said. It's good time we actually see that in action inside ABACUS. So let me go ahead and start sharing my screen. Yep, cool. So to anyone who is new with ABACUS, if it's first time you see the interface, this part is what we call the ABACUS Enterprise. As you can see, it's a browser-based portal where you can use to present your architecture work and facilitate collaboration inside the architecture. And we also have another part called ABACUS Studio, where the construction happens and do the heavy liftings. We also will cover that very briefly, but today we will focus on the enterprise side. And if it's not first time you see enterprise, but you probably also notice we have user interface change. So we had recent update to ABACUS 11 in mid of October. And this time we actually had major update on the look of it to work on the aesthetics. And also we better facilitate navigation and empowers the users to have more functionalities to actually work on the artifacts inside ABACUS Enterprise. We'll cover all of them. So to start with, now you actually have a shortcut menu to suggest you what you can create for a dashboard. So first, if we are doing the roadmap for our 2024 year, we definitely need to create a header for that. So first, I try to add a portlet of property. So here it's listing all the architectures I have. I can drill down to any of the architecture and go ahead and find the title bar I want to include. So this time I just pre-create this roadmap 2024 for application and capabilities. So now I can actually show which property I want. I just go with the default name and I can give a nice color effect. So let's just go with a muted orange and go with finish. So you can see now the header is able to be dragged and dropped to place at any location to serve as a good header. And now we save the change. So in order to plan for the roadmap for the portfolio, we probably want to show the landscape of it. So the next portlet we want to include is just a diagram of the landscape of our business capabilities. So if we go with that, again, this portlet can be freely drag and dropped just to place on the nice location. And we can maximize to see, okay, this is basically what we call a landscape view. And you see there's already color effect to that. And the color is actually not manually edited. It's actually based off a property. So for example, if we right click on this one and we just go with adding our properties. So I know this is actually based on the lifecycle recommendation. So if I go in here, change from retain invest to return and eliminate. So what you will see is this one turning from green to that of red. So that's actually the data-driven part, as you can see. So now with the portfolio of processes, they are just in landscape view. There's no basically like way to show which processes are more important than the others by different criteria. So we actually have a way to present our portfolio in sort of a bubble chart by two domains. So let's go with that and add a new portlet. In here, we go with the visualization. You can see we have different charts to choose from. We go with our bubble chart, and we go with our production as is again, and search for the component type of process. And now we are able to select the X property and Y property. So first, the cost is definitely a key consideration. So we go with financial and total cost of ownership as X property. So for Y, we probably want to look at the complexity of the connectivity. So if more applications are serving the process, if more departments are utilizing the process, that process is probably very complicated. So that's the rationale. And for the size of the bubble, we can go by properties such as the financial data or satisfaction level, etc. But we can also go by fixed value because this one we will have a lot of processes. So we try to make the bubble a bit smaller. And we can also give a color definition for each of the bubble. We definitely can go with the fixed color, but this time we want the image to convey our message. So we actually want to show the life cycle of it. So we go with life cycle recommendation. You can see because we have 4 traces, so it's giving us the index for the color. So first we go with, if we retain and invest, we probably indicate it's a green color. If we are going to return the application, it's going to be something to red. You can see the spectrum traversing from green to yellow to orange to red. So that's helping our storytelling. And now that's good. We can go ahead and create our bubble chart. So as you can see now, it's nicely laying out all the processes in this quadrant view. And you are able to see its financial cost and its interfaces. So it's actually not giving us the storytelling ability. So for example, this one jump out because it's actually having a lot of connectivity and it's also not costing that much. So we definitely want this process to continue, but we may actually consider to break it down because it's overly complicated compared to other processes. Or by comparison for this application, for this process, it actually doesn't have much utilization, but still cost us a lot of money. So we probably want to return this process or just change the usage of it. So I can actually click on this single bubble and the system is actually able to point me to the portfolio. So it's actually committing the change automatically. So it's slowing down the refresh a bit. But eventually you will actually able to see that it's highlighted for me just for this particular bubble. And what's its location actually positioned inside this landscape view, as you can see here. And you may still complain, okay, that's really just a too large portfolio. Can we have other ways just to narrow down to a subset of data? The answer is yes. We can create different views just for the drill down effect. So first, we definitely can have a catalog just for all our processes. So in here, we go to our architecture, and I go with my process lifecycle catalog. So in here, I can put it next. And in here, you're able to see all the applications I'm able to actually search for. And here I can search by lifecycle of retirement. So that's by the default filter. If I don't like that filter, I can come in here and unfilter that. So in this way, I can see all the applications lifecycle and just use that to actually filter for my portfolio. So for example, I want to look at which processes are actually being returned or being redesigned or tolerate. So I can search for that criteria and you see the portfolio is actually filtered with it. And other than this, we definitely can use other portlets such as the typical pie chart just to look at the KPIs, we want to actually filter for the dashboard. So this time we go with our architecture data again, at production as is. We go with the portfolio of the process again. And this time we can use a KPI just to filter. So this time we go with the information and satisfaction level. So I would definitely want to aggregate the data and show the property value. This time I go with the default color effect. So now as you can see, I'm actually able to use this pie chart. And for example, I want to look at the process with low satisfaction because these should be the processes we actually put effort into. So you can see the portfolio is further filtered for me. So yeah, that's a basic illustration of how you can use the tagging and heat map effect just to profile your processes. And you can actually use the connection with applications to see the impact already. That's answered the question of what. Passing back to you, Lian.
Thanks, Ryan. We'll move on to the type 2, and I can see a couple questions coming through. So again, feel free to continue popping those in the Q&A, and we'll answer those at the end of the session today. And also feel free to put them in the chat if you prefer. So looking at the type 2, type 2 roadmaps are largely about when, or time, in other words. The type 1 was, of course, tagging and heat mapping with recommendations. Consider that to be the what of roadmaps, but they mainly focus on providing a direction or to narrow down to an area of particular concern, but they don't articulate time or dependencies of change activities. I think for most people, it would be quite difficult to show time in a type 1 roadmap. So Ryan, how could we solve this with the type 2?
Yep. So traditional Gantt chart is actually already a good solution because that shows the timing and also some dependencies of the change activities, so such as a waterfall chart. But typically, they don't articulate the dependent components from the EA perspective. So to bridge the two, we definitely need to apply more granular time information to the dependent components in our roadmap as life cycles, and then utilize the dependencies we have modeled to create more interactive Gantt chart. So with the visualization of dependencies, we can then make more informed decision based on the timeline of our change.
Okay, so from what you're saying then, if we set a definitive date for the retirement of something, and then that impacts the underlying components somehow?
Yeah, that's correct. And also, that's also something we need to decide on. It can actually go both ways. So do we actually want to enforce the change of the dependent components once the process actually returns? Or should we just let the process wait naturally with the end of the life of its supporting technology? If that process is good to have and not so costly, we don't really need to enforce the retirement. But both of the decision, either way, will depend on the life cycle information for us to make the decision.
Okay, I see. Would we be able to see an example of that perhaps?
Yep, of course. That's a bit abstracted just by talking. So let me share my screen. So the next thing we want to create for life cycle is definitely a Gantt chart. So we just go to the visualization we have. And here you have the option to create a Gantt chart. And for Gantt chart, we definitely need to select a starting point. And in here, you see we can select all the processes and capabilities. But just for illustration purpose, we will select a subset of it. So we can go with operating processes and select all the children. So this will include the capabilities and process under it. Then the next page is basically working on the connectivity, the dependency of the enterprise architecture. So you see capabilities have connections to other components, and so does process. So in here, because we are only focusing on the capability application roadmap, so we only want to include what applications are being impacted if the process come to end of life. So we select the application that's being used by the processes. And the next page is basically allowing us to give a color effect for our time interval. So for the capability, we just go with into production date and end of life and go with a default color theme. And for process, we also go with into production date and also end of life and choose a different color in here just for differentiation. Give it a navy blue. And be too close, maybe change to a lighter blue like here. Okay, and for applications, we now are actually able to give different intervals. So we start from the development date to into production date. So that's like the development phase. And because the application isn't ready, or we probably want a color just to convey the message. So we go with something like a yellow. So in this way, we know it's basically telling us it's not so ready yet. And then we can add a date interval from the into production date to that of end of life. And because now the application is in action, we probably just go with green just to show it's active. And that's it. We have all the information to create such Gantt chart. Let me make this bigger and also save the information. Now we see the full screen of it. You see it's actually showing the drop down for you to drill down to the next level. So for example, we look at the process of self-service credit card application for a banking industry. So as you can see, we have processes left dependency here. And we can also drill down to another layer on what applications are being used by this process. So in this scenario, we can see that the managed card benefit information is actually going to migrate to another loyalty program. So it's going to be actually coming to end of life for this process by end of 2024. And we actually have two applications used by this process, which is our official website. For sure, we will keep that. But for this perks manager, as you can see, it's going to be retired 2 years later, like 3 years later, actually. So we probably can come to the decision if this application is solely used by this process, we now don't need anymore. So just with the end of life date, we can enforce the retirement of this application in this way. So you see, that's how you can utilize the dependencies of components to help you make a decision. So that's one scenario where you enforce the change to other dependent components. How about you utilize the lifecycle information of dependent component to make change for the process? So we can actually come back to our ABACUS Studio. So this is the user interface. In here, I actually have a catalog just showing the end of life processes, its lifecycle information application is using. And what I'm introducing here is something we call the no-code algorithm, which can help you to do calculation. And the reason it's called no-code because as you see here, you don't write any code. You just drag and drop your building blocks to actually facilitate the calculation. So in our scenario, as you see here, you have the supporting application coming to end of life. And in here, you see our planned end of life date is quite close to the supporting applications. So how about we just have a dependent end of life date calculated from the application end of life and use that as a real end of life. So you see, this is our calculation steps. And the beauty of that is before it's even finished, we are able to run and see each step for the result. So first step, as you see, we get all the applications. Second step, we get the end of life dates of the applications, as you see here. And the third step is we attribute the earliest end of life for the application to that of process. So basically, you see here, for this application, for this process, it's supported by 2 applications, and this application come to end of life earlier than the first one. So we actually want the dependent of life to be exactly the same as this one. So the final step is I just need to set a property. So I just drag and drop this box onto the workstation. And in here, I just select the lifecycle information and go with the dependent end of life. And now if I trigger the algorithm, as you can see, the property is automatically filled for me. So I hope that's a good illustration on how you can actually use the dependent components lifecycle to decide for your main component. So either way actually works, depending on your scenario. That's about the life cycle part to answer when the change should happen for road mapping. I'll pass back to you, Liam.
Thanks, Ryan. That's a great overview of time and the type 2 roadmap there. So let's now take a look at the type 3. So with the type 1 and the type 2, we've seen the what and the when of roadmaps, and now we're going to take a look at the how, or again, the type 3, which focuses a lot on work packages and interdependencies. So generally, what we mean when we say type 3 and the how type roadmap, we'll be looking at how we implement the changes and how the changes will impact other components. So the visualization you're seeing on screen right now might be familiar to you, but what we're trying to articulate is how things are connected and perhaps provide an overview for various stakeholders on what their decisions might impact. So Ryan, where would everyone have seen this type 3 roadmap before, or what would a type 3 commonly be used for?
Yep. So if you are familiar with the TOGAF or Archimedes framework, you definitely recognize the one on the screen. It's about the concept of work packages. So work package is really just the equivalent of phases in a project or the project itself, or a program if you define a large work package. So work package actually help to articulate how to implement the changes over different stages.
Okay, so would we only show this with a diagram then?
Yep. So diagram is certainly a good artifact to show that. And other artifacts you can use include the catalogs and the matrices for impact analysis, where diagrams are usually just to visualize your solution for implementation. And also you definitely can use the no-code algorithm, which we just showed, to cascade the data across. And also in ABACUS, you can take a step forward to understand how the changes actually will affect other parts of the organization in a very feasible way. Like if you consider your architecture as a bird's nest, you can turn your your architecture is a spider net. You can consider your end users to be individual spider who is able to actually traverse on that spider net just to drill down to the information of their interest. And I think it's good time we actually see that in action. So to start with, we definitely have the kind of traditional diagram solution. So we don't even need to go far. So for this landscape view, we can create sort of drill down from here. And if I click on this enterprise roadmap, now you'll see it's basically a solution view for what our goal is and what projects is going to fulfill that goal and what are the impacted processes. So then if I drill down to the project itself, now it's showing much detail in one particular process and what is the applications going to be used as the solution for the new process. And if I go down in here, that's basically a solution of interface architecture on how to satisfy for that particular process. So that's definitely a good way. But you see one problem in here is you definitely have a lot of projects going on at the same time. If the user want to see some of them, you probably still will need to publish all the solution views as diagrams in a single dashboard, which is not ideal at all. You will have too many portlets each for the individual projects. So isn't that better if you could just provide a single view for the user to actually navigate to the project of their interest? Also, we actually have that solution inside ABACUS, which is what we call a graph view. So a graph view is basically putting your architecture as a fact, like a spider net, and allow you just to traverse to the direction you want. Since it's a specialized form of diagram, so that's why you can see you are able to select a diagram viewpoint for that. And the diagram viewpoint is basically narrowing down to what are the components you can see from the diagram. So if I go with the solution view, you'll see it's basically showing all the technology solutions in here. So I'm fine with that. I just go with a starting point of all my capabilities and processes. So now this is definitely overly simplified view, but you can definitely go to the direction So you can imagine if you go with operations and process, there will be a lot of it. But this particular stakeholder doesn't want to see that part. He only wants to see the management and support processes. So I can just click on this part and just to look at one individual process of development, human resource. And in here, I'm able to see, okay, here are basically all the projects impacting or providing resolution to this process. Or if I click on the project again, I'm able to see, okay, what are other components being impacted by this particular project. So in this way, I'm able to see, okay, the color indicate this server is actually going to be returned by this project. So if the server is going to be returned, what are other components going to be impacted by the retirement? So if I drill down again, I'm able to see that all these platform services will actually need to find a new server to host them. So let's actually go to one of them to see if they are taken care of. So yeah, that's good. I can see this one is now going to be hosted on another server. So you see, you can imagine if I expand every single nodes in our architecture, it will be practically unreadable. But graph view just allow us to drill down to the single direction of our concern and just abstract all the rest of the information. So you can imagine different users will come to the same graph view and drill down to different directions just to see their information. That's a lot easier to present your project in this way. And the user may even complain, okay, this is still too complicated. I don't want to see all these data bases, the network elements. How about I just see the projects, the process and application? That cannot be simpler. I just go to my viewpoint again, and I just search for a viewpoint showing only these component types. I don't need to change anything else. Now with the same view, I can just drill down and only see the ones I actually defined that need to that can be presented on the canvas. So that's how you can even provide a simpler look for different stakeholders if they don't care for that many like a noisy unrelated components. Yep, that's about the work package on how to implement them using solution views and how the solution actually have impact on other components using the graph view. Passing back to you, Lian.
Thanks, Ryan. So it's a great way for different stakeholders to explore the architecture repository. It seems that we have like the static view there, which is your standard diagram, and then I guess that more dynamic view, the visualization, the graph view, so they can walk through the different areas of the business or the architecture themselves. Okay, so far we've looked at our type 1, our type 2, and our type 3 roadmaps, or the what, when, and how. And these are each focused on a specific solution. But what if we have multiple options to achieve the same goal? This is where things can get complex quite quickly. Most stakeholders, just the one scenario may be enough to wrestle with, especially with all the dependencies, the time factors, and the impacts as well to consider that we've seen today. But what if we were motivated or really required to provide different alternatives? We need to be able to compare and contrast all these finer points from the previous roadmaps so that they can make a decision. So Ryan, how can we help our stakeholders make an informed decisions with all this information?
Yep, so in ABACUS, you basically can model each scenario and compare the expected results for our stakeholders to make their decision. So that's basically leading to our type 4 method, which is about multiple architectural modeling approach and to test out the what if scenarios. And let's see that in action. Yep. So what you are looking at on the left is just the solution view we just saw for the one of the processes. So in the what if scenario is that we actually want to return the ERP financials front end and move that to cloud. So in this way, we definitely think we would have a lower financial cost, etc. But the architect actually really wants to test out the scenario using the algorithms we have, but he doesn't want to actually mess up with the production data. So what he can do is actually evolve the architecture of our production assets and create kind of sandbox environment for us to test out this scenario. So I go with add new and go with the diagram again. This time I go to production as is, but under production as is, I have an evolved architecture called Roadmap 2024, which is having exactly the same data set for now. And I can click on this same interface diagram. So you see now they are actually exactly the same. So this is where I can start to do the scenario change to test out the expected results. So introduced in ABACUS 11 is the drag and drop stencil you have from the enterprise side. So in this way, you don't necessarily need to go back to Studio to modify the graph, but rather you can simply create your modification to a same diagram from enterprise. So let me show in here. So first, we definitely want to return for this application as it's already marked by red. And now I can delete that from the architecture. And once it's deleted, the connection it has together deletes with it. And now we definitely want to create another layer called cloud, because we want to actually move this one to our to a cloud provider. I can make the box bigger so it later can accommodate for ships inside. And now I can add in the new intended application, which is ERP Cloud. And once that component is created, because ABACUS is data-driven, once the ship is added, the component and also the data is created together with it. And now if that ERP is actually interfacing with our intranet, we can create a connection in this way very easily. And if I need to change some of the properties, like for example, the lifecycle recommendation or number of users, this is going to be used by 50 users and the application is myself, for example. So now the data is actually captured and pushed to repository. And also this drag and drop will be facilitating the collaboration as well, because I can actually link my view to other artifacts inside the architecture, such as a catalog or a diagram. So as an application architect can work with database architect, can work with the technology architect, they can build their individual views and create the linkage inside the views to collectively create a consolidated view. And so you may question, so what's the eventual work we can present to our stakeholder to explain which decision is better? So eventually you are able to provide a dashboard like this. So see, this is exactly what we did just by change in the interface diagram of new components. The KPIs are actually changed together with it because with the change of connections and the attributes, these data are actually auto-calculated. So we can see now the availability is better on cloud, complexity is lower with fewer connections, that's good. But response time is actually longer because the data center of cloud is actually far from our service location. So that's a consideration for trade-off. Financial data is lower, customer satisfaction is actually higher. So yeah, then we can present this one for our stakeholder to decide. If it's a really latency sensitive solution, we probably don't go cloud. If it's a cost sensitive one, we definitely want to go cloud. So that's basically how you can use the different scenarios to present different alternatives for your stakeholders to make decision. Yep, passing back to you, Liam.
So that's pretty much covered off the type 1, the type 2, the type 3, and now the type 4. We did, of course, say we'd look more at the analytical roadmaps, or what we're referring to as types 5 to 8 here as well. So Ryan, can you give us a quick overview of how these can be used and what we might need to include in types 5 to 8?
Yep, sure. Due to time constraint, I will be really brief. And if you are interested in any one of them, we can have follow-up sessions. Please let us know. But really, type 5 is about calculated value analysis. So on top of the no-code algorithms you can use, we also have cutting-edge machine learning function of Ask ABACUS to gather data pattern and turn that into organizational knowledge for roadmap decisions. And type 6 is about data attribution inside architecture. One typical example is we all know that processes have cost to run, But how do we decide what the process actually costs? One approach is to attribute the cost of supporting components to that process. And tab 7 and 8 are all both dashboard based. Tab 7 is about domain focused, which we will see. And tab 8 is actually about ad hoc analysis and self-servicing. So by using the dashboard, which is intentionally designed for interaction, the users can focus and drill down just to the information of their concern. And also they are able to do self-service to create artifacts from architectural work. And now let's see a quick overview of each of the type. So moving to tab 5, which is about analytics on calculated value or machine learning. I definitely want to show you our machine learning really quickly on how in the long run, this cutting edge technology can benefit for your roadmap and decision making. So this scenario is just the end of life for media sanitization, for example, a hard drive. If it's coming to end of life, you definitely want to have some decision made to handle it. So whether do you want to clear the content, purge the content, or destroy the hardware? The decision is actually based on this security classification, if it's low, moderate, or high, and also based on decision whether do you want to reuse the media or is the component leaving the organization control. So in here, for example, if the classification is moderate, if we want to reuse it, and if it's leaving organizational control, then we need to purge the data. So you see, you might not necessarily have a decision tree for every single decision you make for your organization. ABACUS is actually able to capture the pattern and help you populate the data according to the pattern ABACUS observed. So in here, let's do a quick test. So I'm adding a new configuration item in here, and I gave it end of life stage of end of life. So it's presented in here. So let's go with this route. Our security classification is high. And we actually want to reuse the component in here. And it's actually not leaving organizational control. So by the decision tree, you see it's actually suggested to be purged. So let's see if ABACUS is giving us the same recommendation. So if I hover over this magic wand, you see it's actually giving us the suggestion of purge. And it's giving over 97% confidence just based on slightly over 100 entry. It's already able to give very accurate prediction. Okay, this is supposed to be purged. So you see, this is some simple decision, but in your organization, there might be more complicated decision that people won't be able to create such decision tree, but people are actually following something intuitively very similar to this to make consistent decision. And then ABACUS is able to observe the pattern and help you to decide for future roadmap decisions. That's about tab 5. And tab 6 is really just about the attributions of data. So for example, on the left, you'll see a data center cost. The cost is actually just attributed by the all the servers and network elements in there. So these are actually not self-entered. They are just like attributed data. And on the rest, it is about a cost attribution. So in our scenario, process have its cost to run, but it's like having department supporting that, application used by that, and also technology supporting the application, and project also remediate for the process. So all these costs are actually able to be attributed to that single process using the connections in between. So in this way, we have a more objective assessment and presentation of the cost of the process for the roadmap decision. And lastly, about tab 7 and tab 8 on the dashboard in usage for ad hoc analysis. So in here, the scenario is okay. We have the end of life, like planning for all the applications, but that's also dependent for the technology platforms, which is like a work by a different architect. So for example, I'm now the platform architect. I want to just create my view and also communicate to the individual application managers for my work. So first I can just drill down to this website server technologies. And for example, I go with Apache Tomcat. So I can see here for these applications, they are fine because they are actually coming to end of life before I want to retire my technology platform. But then for this one, ERP marketing, it's having a problem. Again, because it's going to be it's going to continue after the retirement of my technology. So I actually can just see who is the owner in here. Okay, for ERP marketing, it's myself. I can just click like a pretend it's another user and open the Teams window, Teams chat window. And if I pop up the chat in here, you can see I'm actually able to communicate with the owner of the application, saying this one, you actually need to migrate. Do you have a decision? And what's actually better, I can embed this dashboard inside Teams so the user can actually click on this link and navigate to that same dashboard in here um, without even leaving the organizational platform. And for the existing data, once the user is coming here, he's able to say, okay, for this ERP marketing, I know it's actually coming to end of life. So I'm going to change the life cycle to retire and eliminate. So with the change of the data, I'm also able to, okay, we don't have that many users left. Let's change to 12. So you see how that's how the users are actually able to collaborate their work together in a single platform. That's about tab 7 and 8. Yep, that's all from my side. Passing back to you, Lian.
So we're now at the end of the session today. Let's have a quick recap on what we've covered. So the type 1 to 4 as traditional roadmaps, which help you build the roadmap in a resilient, actionable way. Then the types 5 to 8 allow you to leverage algorithms, machine learning, and interactively self-servicing dashboards to promote enterprise-wide EA collaboration. Ryan, we've covered a lot of content today, but what would you want everyone to take away from today's session?
Yep. So I think the first one is definitely we definitely want to have a good road mapping platform. Also, I know people have been using like traditional ones like PowerPoint slides, but compared to that, Abacus really allows the users to self-service and drill down to the interested area, which is data-driven, and also keep being updated in real time. Like a PowerPoint slide will basically get obsoleted by the time you present to your stakeholders, where enterprise is always up to date with the change of data. And second thing is you are highly encouraged to use standards and frameworks because they greatly help the communication between different stakeholders with common understanding and modeling approach. So typical ones can be using TOGAF, Archimate, or Avolution framework, where the idea of progression and gap analysis is actually being minded when these frameworks are created. And the third one is that you can tailor your presentation according to different stakeholders' preference. So for example, when working with domain architects, provide them just open template, allow them to improvise and create the artifacts themselves. And when working with end users who would like to just drill down by themselves, you can just provide dashboards that giving them the option, just like the one I presented. And by contrast, working with top management who won't be interested or have the time to drill down to navigate, go straight to the point, provide them with KPI portlets, showing them the aggregated value from overview and showing the trend and showing strictly to the expected outcomes. And last but not least, the algorithms should be incorporated just to quantify the change. And it's also in a democratized way because the algorithms can be like a decide by wider audience. Each department can contribute to the KPIs they think important by their definition. And you incorporate all these suggestions in a single calculation algorithms. So your analytical result is more reliable and convincing in this way. Yep, that's all the takeaways, I think.
Okay, great. That's some really good info for the audience today and people listening in. So hopefully everyone's gotten a lot of value out of today's session. we'll move now to the Q&A session, and I think we've got a few minutes left. Yes, looks like about 5 or 10 minutes we have for questions, and I can see some coming in already. So we'll jump straight into those. But of course, if you do have questions, feel free to chuck those in the chat, and you can address them to myself or to Ryan, or feel free to use the Q&A facility as well, and we'll take them as they come through. So first one off the bat here, Ryan. It says here, are there any particular colors that should be used for recommendations or heat maps?
Yep, good question. So usually we go with the kind of green, yellow, orange to red kind of spectrum. But also if you're being considerate and think about the accessibility for your wider organization, where, by the way, ABACUS supports unlimited number of read-only users. So basically anyone from your organization who you may not know can be potential reader of your work. So try to use like a kind of accessible data. Don't use red. For example, change red to blue. You can print out your dashboard if in gray and black view. If you can differentiate, there's color difference. Vision impaired person, color blind person can do that as well. So that's just a quick recommendation on how you cater for the wider audience. And also another suggestion is really not about particular color, but rather about consistency of your color theme. Like for example, you see from the catalog, I definitely can still improve on this, but there's a sort of storytelling in here. Like even for myself, I could improve on that. But what I'm trying to show is green means not so important, not so bad. Red means bad or important. So such color themes can be actually carried out consistently across your organization, so to better convey the message. So I also have a simple example in here. This is basically working on the fundamentals of ABACUS. So this is basically showing how you click on one slice of the pie that will actually filter on the rest of the data together with it. So you see, for the single component, it's really better to keep the color consistent and almost recommended to be exactly the same. So the user, no matter which portrait they are using, they know exactly what is the story you try to tell. So yep, that's my recommendation about color effects.
Okay, great. Got another question here. I'll just take this one. Is the preso going to be available for those who missed the first half an hour? Yes, it absolutely will be. So we're sending out the recording and the slides in the next couple of days. So you'll be having access to that, of course. Another question here, Ryan. This one's probably for you. Does ABACUS only support specific shapes for the business capability map?
Good question. So you are able to import unlimited number of shapes inside ABACUS. And also we have out-of-box frameworks and also shape libraries for you to use. I just noticed I forgot to share my screen for the previous question, but this is the dashboard I was referring to. The color effects is basically for single component, it's represented by same color across the portrait for consistency. So back to the question about a shape library. So to start with, we definitely have existing frameworks such as the AWS or Azure. So for these ones, you don't need to create a single shape, or our shape is being updated with the vendor release. So you can use them out of box. And if you really want to use some bespoke or customized shapes, it's also very easily importable into ABACUS. So a quick example here, if I go to my Explorer and I just want to go to a single diagram for illustration, it's a bit too crowded. Let me clean this a bit, but rather what I want to show in here is the stencil. And so if I go to my shapes type, you'll see I already have a lot of shapes out of box. And you also notice I have some self-imported ones. So I can just simply right-click and import from Visio. So if I go with just my Visio import example, so you see because there are some shapes presented on the Visio file, And the system is actually parsing that visual file and try to pick out what are the shapes on that. So see, it's actually getting all the shapes for me, and I can select all or select a partial of them just to import. So you can imagine if you have some bespoke shapes, just put them on a single visual file, and you are able to import them very easily in this way. Yep, that's about the shapes.
Okay, great. So another question here, Ryan. How many details can Abacus automatically fill using the magic wand when creating a new item?
So basically, it's unlimited. Like as long as you basically it's like a training process. If I go back in here and go to my administrator options, you see in Ask Abacus, I basically can define my training intervals and instances needed, etc. If you want it to be more reliable, you enforce like a minimum 100 instance to at least allow the um, machine learning to train before it gives suggestions. And also you are able to enforce the confidence level threshold. But other than that, all the fields, as long as it's having correlation with other fields or connected properties field, connect components property. So if the Abacus machine learning is able to extract that, it's able to give you suggestion. So the potential is really unlimited.
Okay, excellent. We do have a couple more questions here. We might just take one more because we are at time. So just quickly on this one, Ryan, what are the colors on the graph view indicating?
Okay. So for the graph view, it's actually defined based on a viewpoint. So actually, I don't mind we go back to the basics in here a bit. So for example, in here, we in the studio for my application interface diagram viewpoint, if I go to change colors, you see it's actually using a property for annotating the color. So I can actually edit the color myself. So you see like a refresh my grid is going to be annotated by orange, return inverse by green. So this is basically what you configured in the stencil as basics. And if we go back to the graph view we just had, so it's actually utilizing the same viewpoint. So the color is basically predefined for that inside the Abacus Studio. So I can confidently tell you here, this is basically based on lifecycle recommendation. And the green means retain, orange means redesign, red means return. So that's how I know it. And also you can basically give a color legend for your stakeholders to for easier understanding of each of the color.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ryan. All right, so we might finish there. I know there are a couple more questions there, so we will try to reach out to those people for the questions that we didn't answer and send those to you or arrange a follow-up session if you prefer that as well. But as we are at time, thank you everyone for joining today. We really do appreciate you taking the time out to join this session. Do feel free to reach out to either myself or to Ryan to discuss your road mapping challenges, objectives, and goals. We're always happy to talk with anyone about how they can do road mapping, or of course, if you're curious about anything related to Abacus and enterprise architecture as well,